Oh, hey, we're glad that you're here. We're going to talk to Kyle Steele about unique value proposition. Kyle, tell us how you learned about unique value proposition.
Tell us how I learned it.
Yeah.
I think, I think the easiest thing is just to talk about like the story, my story, right? So, obviously I do quite a few things, but one of the things that I do is this interesting concept around using coding to improve reading skills, right? And so where it originally started was from a place of just coming out of like in 2010 maybe. I was in this place where I was just trying to do much more meaningful work. I was consulting, and
you got to tell them the story.
Which one?
When you're in the office and you're pitching the one product to the potential customer, he tells me, and he says, "Tell me something else." That story.
Wait.
Where you're pitching the big data tech solution, right? And he's like, "Cool."
Oh, that's John Rivers.
Yeah.
I'll get to that piece. Okay. All right. Okay. So the short version is that I was always developing products. I built like started a couple of tech startups, primarily around location-based technology and how to use location-based technology to be able to share information. And so one of the areas that we focused on was like conventions and like how do you share documents, right? So I saw that if I'm in a location, there's a need for vendors or speakers. You're there at an event because you want to interact with the people there, right? That's the value of being there, right? And so like how do you get information to people very quickly and start those interactions faster? And so we developed a solution that ultimately led us to get this funding into this accelerator called Dream Adventures in 2013. But as I was doing that, trying to conquer big business, my heart was kind of like leaning towards a community of kids at the school called Fern Creek Elementary that looked similar to me and how I grew up, which is in low economic conditions, neighborhoods and things like that. And so I had all these skill sets of coding and stuff, and I said like what can I do to help elevate their situation, make it better? And as a result of that, I went over to the school and talked to the principal and said, hey, I want to bring coding to your school. And at the time in public school systems, this is 2010, like coding was a really big thing. Everybody was trying to get it in, but they had no teachers. And so they're like, yeah, come on in. You can teach coding, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. So it was a volunteer thing. Went to the classroom, and this is my first lesson on unique value proposition. Just as a nonprofit without the legal entity, right? Which was when I walked in on day one, I said, hey kids, these are elementary kids, we're gonna learn about coding and you're gonna be able to, you're gonna be able to earn money and, because I'm thinking about the perspective of mine, you're gonna be able to build a business and all this kind of stuff. And these kids looked at me like, what are you talking about, right? And,
well, because they were like third and fourth graders. Right?
Yeah, they were third and fourth graders, right?
And you're going to teach them computer
coding because it's going to change their lives and it's the future, right? And
it will change their lives, and it is the future.
It is the future, but there was a disconnect, which I found, and the disconnect was two things. One, because what you said, they were third and fourth graders. They're not thinking about their career at the third and fourth grade, right? And the other thing is that they were dealing with conditions that were preventing them to even think about the future, right? Like for many of these kids, and I talk about this, was like they were 80% of the school was considered low income, and 25% of the kids, so that means like 1 out of every 4 of the kids in the classroom were considered homeless, right? So these kids were thinking about how do I eat? Am I gonna go home and my furniture or clothes gonna be in a trash bag on the front lawn, where I'm gonna sleep tonight? And so they're dealing with much bigger issues. And so I kind of panicked in that situation, thinking okay, this is not valuable to them at all.
Well, but that is it's a very stark example, but that is a classic problem, especially in social enterprise space, because we come into this work motivated by like a good heart and mission. Like, I want to help improve these kids' quality of life.
Right.
And we don't stop to think about whether or not they're going to be interested in us helping them at all.
Yes.
And that happens with nonprofits trying to sell products. Of course people will buy this product. It's accomplishing all this good. Why wouldn't they buy this product? But you haven't stopped to think about why they're buying any products to begin with.
Right.
And so there's like this mismatch that happens all of the time, right?
Yeah.
And you had this beautiful opportunity to like stand in front of 3rd and 4th graders and have them call you ridiculous or just like not pay attention to you.
Yeah, they just kind of, their eyes glassed over, and I was just like, I'm about to lose this class, right? And I didn't want to lose them. So I knew in my mind that I had to like pivot really, really quickly, right? And so I was thinking like, how do I connect this to them? What's the unique value proposition? And I'll explain like how I view unique value proposition later on. But this is like the genesis of understanding how important it is to uniquely solve a need of someone, or to solve a need for someone in some very unique way, right? That inspires them to engage this thing. And in this case, the first test sample was for these 3rd and 4th graders, right? And so I sat back and I thought to myself, what do we do? And I believe that like I watched something. I don't remember exactly how I came to the genesis of it, which was like, these kids, all of them want to tell their story. Like I realized like they wanted to tell me where they were from and kind of like the stuff that was happening to them, and they had this need to talk and to express themselves, right? And also simultaneously, I realized this is also, it's interesting, that in the classroom, the teacher was that in that 3rd, 4th grade level, like reading literacy is an important thing. And so what I found was that at the end of every session, like the teacher's really trying to hurry up and get back to the reading thing, because it's third grade year, and that's when they do all the testing and stuff like that. And I was just like, man, like if I don't figure out how to win these kids and stay in this classroom with this teacher and not feel like a distraction, like I won't be here, right? And so I started thinking about it, and then I came to the conclusion that I could take storytelling, allow the kids to tell their story in a way that where they get an opportunity to tell their story, and then also to then animate their story, right? Using the coding program that I was using, because I realized the coding program would allow them to create like these little movies, right? And so I said to the kids, hey, here's what we're gonna do now. Tell me your story. They're like, yeah, I want to do that. I said, okay, write it down. They're like, okay, that's cool, I can write it down. And then I said, okay, how about you draw the story? And then they said, okay, yeah, that's even better, right? They were really excited about putting pictures to the story. And then I said to them, okay, let's turn those pictures into a movie. And they were like, oh man. So they completely forgot about the coding and engaged the process, which included coding. And then, unbeknownst to me, like I realized that what I was doing was doing things that they were reading, right? They were writing, and then they were doing this thing called visualization, which is key to comprehension, which every teacher understands, right? So if I can get someone to visualize a concept, a text concept, and turn it into pictures, mental images, the concept that I'm trying to teach you will anchor into your head. And so by taking it from them writing their story, which now they're practicing their writing, to then drawing it, now they're visualizing it, then using coding, I immediately found the alignment both with the teacher. So the teacher saw that I was useful because they can give me a concept like the solar system that was in writing or whatever, or a story that they wanted the kids to read. Then I would take that story and give it to the kids. They would draw that story, and then they would use the program to then code that story, right?
So the thing, like, you that process of going, oh man, I really care about these kids. I resonate with the challenges. I want to help them in this way. I have this skill set. I know this will help them in the future. Going in there and figuring out like how to deliver it in a way that hit the problem that they felt but still accomplished your purpose.
Yeah.
Like that is like a good driving line, but it's not a business yet.
Yeah, it's not a business
right?
yet.
And I don't think you were necessarily thinking about it in that way at that point. You were just like, how do I help these kids in this way, right? Yeah. And this is an important progression because it's common among social entrepreneurs that they're motivated by this mission. They get in and solve this mission. Then they get down the road and you had that conversation that made you think, oh, is there a way to flip this into a business and still accomplish the mission, right?
Yeah, I mean, So this thing was growing and starting to grow, and actually it turned into a real nonprofit that a private family fund out of Maryland gave us money and gave us substantial money in order to run it on a year-to-year basis. But at the time, there was a struggle because I needed to earn money, and I had to start up, and this thing was growing, and I felt like this weird sense of there's this grant dollars that's allowing it to exist, so I felt a little vulnerable to that. Well, what if it went away? And so, but my interest still was in trying to make the startup that I was doing successful, right? And so then that's when what Ben is talking about. I walked into one of the mentors, John Rivers, and it was just a conversation of just I wanted to talk to him as a businessman and just trying to understand how does he approach business and things like that. And so I was talking to him about what I was doing, but both the business side, with the emphasis being on the business side.
You were talking about that place-based technology that you
Yeah. Because by then it morphed into where we were taking data and being able to create these really intricate images around people and using their email addresses. And so one of our customers was CBS Interactive, and they had databases of millions and millions of email addresses that ran stale, and they were trying to figure out how to re-engage these individuals. And I convinced them that if you give the email address to us, we can create these profiles around them, figure out what they're interested in, and then you can use those interests and then market to them in a very targeted fashion, right? So I was way further advanced than actually I feel like that company would have been a success now, but I was way ahead of the curve. Yeah, I was way ahead of the curve on this, and so I wanted to grow that. They gave us a check, and I was trying to figure out how to do that, and then also money was starting to get tight at that moment, and then. We started going down this line about this other work that I was doing, and then that's when we figured out.
He just was wow,
yeah,
you're way more engaged in this conversation about how you're volunteering at Fern Creek.
Yeah.
When I talk to you in conversation, you're way more animated and you come alive than when I'm talking to you about this business.
Yeah.
You seem kind of on autopilot.
Yeah.
And that is worth saying. You can't say it too many times, is the great opportunity of social enterprise.
Right.
You can do things that you care deeply about that have positive impact in the world. And he's why don't you make that a business?
Yeah, and it never dawned on me make it a business, right? And I was just oh, that's interesting, right? And so then that's the pursuit I went on, right? And then it became a challenge of how do I get schools?
Who's the customer?
Yeah, who's the customer, right? And so immediately I thought, okay, who has budget in the school? And I said, okay, well, let me go, the low-hanging fruit is let me just go to every principal in certain schools and just say, hey, I got this thing, will you pay me X for it, right? And so I put together a presentation, what I thought was the pain points that they wanted to hear, and it was really still around coding and it was pieces of elements of the reading component of it, but I didn't realize how important of a component and driver that was. And so I went into these schools, and one of the things I said to myself is that I'm gonna really pay attention as I say these things to them. I want to see how they respond to me, right? So I would say words and say things, and sometimes they'd be it'll just fall flat, and then sometimes I would say stuff, and it would get them excited. And I said, okay, I need to fill the presentation with all the exciting stuff that they get excited about. So, but really the activity was me trying to understand what's resonating with them, right? The problem that's resonating and
with the teachers.
Well, really with the customer, right? Which at this time it was the principal who wrote the check, right? And so as a byproduct of that, I'm testing pain points and unique ways of solving them.
So you're going in on sales conversations with principals, and you're
this is a coding program.
Right.
I want to bring
you're
coding.
watching them to see, oh, he gets excited when I talk about
This.
kids' stories.
Yeah, like they got excited about what the thing that they got excited about was the coding, which was important. But when I linked it to reading, that's when they really said, "Oh, we gotta do this." And so it was interesting because I would walk into every conversation and they were like, "Okay, we're in it," right?
When you talked about reading.
Yeah, when I talk about reading. And so I was like actively learning, and I would change that presentation constantly to reflect any new learning, even words, like certain words worked and certain words didn't. And so I'm learning, right? I'm just crafting, getting it down, and then finally I'm just walking into conversations, and they're just like, we're in. And it ended up being like 7 schools, and there was like 2 of us at the time. But I was doing all the heavy lifting, and I was going to be the one to execute this. And I looked, and at one point I realized I kind of overcommitted myself because I'm teaching 23 classes in a week across 7 schools, right?
A third and
fourth graders, right? So yeah, that went really successfully, and then that leads to one of you and I's favorite conversation about the Wildcats.
Yeah,
where the brief version of the story is that I signed up all these schools and stuff, and they committed contracts and everything, and we're ready to start.
They're all in the same school district.
Yeah, they're all in the same same school district, Warren County, and then and I'm sitting in Ben's coffee shop, and in this back room at the North or College Park location, and I get this call, and it's just like OCPS district on it, like that's the caller ID. I'm like, oh, what is this? And then I pick up the phone, and they introduce themselves, and I say that it wasn't one person; it was multiple people sitting in a room, but it was led by like the main guy, like I mean, we're talking about director level, right? Like C level, right, in the district, and they're like, "Hey, is this the company that I was running at the time? It's called Source Code before 6." I was like, "Yeah. Hey, we need to talk to da 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 da." And they were literally upset because they thought that I was a much bigger company because they were like, we have this Wildcat, we got a problem. That's how they started off. We got a problem. The problem is we got this Wildcat running through our system.
We got a Wildcat running through our system.
Signing up all of our teachers and all of our schools, and that's a problem, right? Like this big organization coming in, signing up, and I was like, first of all, I'm only a 2-man shop. So I convinced him. And so the problem was.
But he also said we're the 10th largest school district.
Yeah, we're the 10th largest.
This Wildcat running.
Yeah, we got this Wildcat. So they thought I was a much bigger company because that's just how I was rolling, right? And then they said to themselves, and so I convinced them that that's not what we are. And then he said, well, we have processes, procedures. You didn't follow them. And I knew that principals had a certain amount of influence over the district, right? And if a principal wanted something, then they can get it, right? And so part of the thing was like I had principals who were part of schools that were really important to OCPS and principals who had a lot of high influence. So they knew that they couldn't totally disrupt it because it would cause a lot of backlash, and it was so close, and there was so much stuff in place. But at the same time, he had to teach me. He was trying to teach me a lesson, and so he was talking about pulling it, and I convinced him that part of the American way is being a wildcat, right? Like every business, this is America. Like you're un-American if you like. I know you're mad at what I'm doing, but you have to recognize that this is American. If you're American, then you appreciate this, right?
So we talk about that. There's times when you got to wildcat something. You just gotta go around the system and figure it out, and then you can back into.
You just kind of like do it, ask for permission later.
But if you had gone straight to this dude in Orange County and tried to launch a program, you never would have gotten anywhere. So you had to wildcat that. But the thing that you wildcatted really was like understanding your customer, what problem they had, in order that you could deliver a unique solution to that problem.
Yeah.
So what would you say was the UVP that you landed on for Source Code before 6?
So when I speak about UVP, like UVP does 3 things really well, maybe 4 things. But one, it says really clearly like who you are, right? I'm an education company. I'm X, right? The next thing it says is like it identifies as like who do you serve, right? Who's the customer in it, right? And so for me, it was K-5 organizations, right? And so, and then the question is like, what is the problem that they're experiencing? And for me, it was reading literacy. And the unique way of solving it was through storytelling, art, and coding, right? But I didn't come up with that language like overnight. Like I had to like massage it and play with it. And I try not to use reading. I try to use other fancier terms. But ultimately, it ended up being that we're an education organization that helps K-5 organizations improve their students' reading skills through storytelling, art, and coding. The storytelling, art, and coding. So when I said that to someone, or a teacher, or someone in education, they immediately knew what I was, knew that they were the customer, and they can resonate with that problem really, really quickly. Like, oh yeah, like reading is important to me because I realized like reading in K-5 is super important, right, to them. And that's like, if you could help them get there, then that's part of your, like you win, right? And then the other thing was when I added in storytelling, art, and coding, that was so strange to them that I can do that through really the coding piece. They were like, well, how do you do that? And so the UVP not only helps them identify what that they're the customer, that you're solving their problem and you're doing it in a unique way, but it then starts to open up another set of conversations. Like, tell me more, right? Like, it gives you, it's the door opener, and that's how I kind of look at UVP.
Yeah, so it's like intentionally very limiting. Part of the kickback we get from people when you're trying to force them into a clear, unique value proposition is they feel like they're excluding people or they're limiting their reach. But that's like very targeted language to a very specific person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, like problems are so like, okay, so the thing with the education company is that I had to make a choice. Do I want to be all to everybody, or do I want to be an expert? And I chose to be an expert, and I said K-5, like my UVP would not work with middle school and high school, because in middle school and high school, it's not a reading is not no longer a priority. In K-5, reading is a major priority. And so as a small organization, and I said, okay, well, how many potential schools are there, right? Like, how many potential clients are there? And then when I looked at the market, I said, okay, there's like, 2.5 or 3 million elementary teachers. There's like 54 million elementary kids, and if I charge them X, there's plenty of market here, right? So me being limiting, limiting wasn't helped me to, one, get really focused in how I deliver the product, because I knew, like, why waste my time going over here and trying to do work with a middle school or high school. Like, they came to me all the time. Matter of fact, I even tried doing that for a second, going out to a middle school just to see, and it was just a disaster, right? And I said, let me just get back over here.
And that stays also with administrators even more than parents. Parents might key in that their kids need reading, but administrators really know that this is the challenge. Can you talk a little bit about, remember when you built that email list of people who had come through and teachers where you said, let me really blow this up and see if this resonates with teachers across the board?
Yeah. So now I've turned the business into a for-profit, and then it was a matter of like, how can I scale this, right? I knew I could not scale it.
Wildcatting.
Yeah, wildcatting. And I knew I could not scale it quickly going into trying to sell to school districts. And so the question became, could I build this product in a way that the customer actually becomes a parent, but one of the conduits or the people that gets me to the parents, because I realized they had a high influence on it, was the teachers, because in elementary, teachers have a high influence on on parents in terms of what tools that they get, that parents purchase and buy for their kids. And I was like, if I can win the parent, if I can win the teacher, that gives me an instant distribution channel into 22 students in the class, and then you times that by the number of parents, right? Each student has maybe 1, 2 parents, right? And so, like, this is a perfect distribution strategy, right? And so what I did was I went out and I said, okay, first of all, let me see if I can get a list of teachers, which is not easy to do. Like, it's impossible, almost impossible to do. And so what I ended up having to do was go on websites and like scrape email addresses, right? So, like, I mean, it's not legal, right? But it's like some gray area, right? So I had to like go and scrape. I built. Well, there's tools out there, but I would essentially use a tool that I could say, okay, go to this page, and I would go to the directories of teacher, and it would go through and it would scrape according to the parameters that I wanted, right?
And you did that to build a national list of emails, and then send out that UVP to the teachers and give them an opportunity to respond.
Yeah. So initially it was okay. So I built this list that was like thousands and thousands and thousands of teachers, right? Like, and so then it was like, okay, once I build a list, I need to test this unique value proposition and see if I can get the teachers to bite on this. And the promise was, at the time, I didn't know whether or not if I could charge the teachers, but I wanted to test it, which was like, I'm gonna give you a free version of this platform, and the goal is to I'm gonna give you a version of this, but the more expensive version, it's not even built yet. The more expensive version is X dollars a month, but I'm gonna give it to you for like $100 or something. I can't remember what the number was. Like, it was some number, and so I was testing this language, and I get a good response rate, and then I said, man, like, why isn't it getting better? So I'm constantly, I make it better, hone it in, and then finally, like I said, I have 500 slots open, and so what I want to do is, you want to be a part of this, sign up, and part of sign up, you got to pay me money, right? And so but for a product that's not even built. And so when I saw that the goal was for us that we can get 100 people to pay us,
like it was like $10 or something.
Yeah, it was like 10
just to hold their spot.
Just to hold their spot,
yeah.
Right? For a product that's not even built, with no promise of it being built. I think it was more than that. Like, I feel like it was more than that because it was significant. When I got them to pay me for a product that does not exist and was no promise of it, just based on a simple description, I knew that I hit it. I was like, okay, this is it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Were you the only one offering this service at the time? Did you have any competition that you were aware of? Because a lot of times the UVP helps you to differentiate from competition, but in this case, it almost sounds like you were the only wildcat out there.
No, because there's people providing coding programs to schools for free, right? So you have Scratch and Tinker and all kind of people.
The unique thing that Kyle did was he was in the coding space, especially when people were trying to figure out how do we introduce tech into classrooms. We want teachers to be using technology and introducing coding. But nobody, I feel like, at the space, maybe it's different now, was actually listening to the teachers, because the teachers were not trained in coding,
yes.
And they were not really evaluated on coding. It was like this high testing where, especially in elementary school, they've got to perform on the test. So the teachers did not care about that. They cared about the kids performing on tests. And so Kyle did this unique thing where he merged the technology with the problem that the teachers were surfacing, so that now the teachers are advocates for it, right? Where they weren't for all these other tech solutions. That's why it's an interesting story around unique value proposition, because it's like listening without prescribing a response, and going, oh wow, when I say story, they light up, let's go further. Oh, when I say reading, now let me just, and then he changed the program a little bit to match. So rather than just developing a program out of the blue, they're taking these stories and animating these stories. They're writing their own stories, they're animating those stories.
Yeah, I mean, everything was responsive, right? Like, and that's why, like, it was the one thing because I'd already made that mistake of building product on what I thought people wanted, right? And that didn't go well. And so this time I wanted to be smarter about it. And so in order to do that, I had to remain like really, really agile and open to modifying and changing the product. What I originally envisioned, I had to like let go of that and say it's okay if it morphs into something completely different, right? And in this case, it started from teaching coding, to like, oh no, really, I'm using coding to help them tell stories, but I'm just disguising the coding and stories, but really it's still about coding. To like, oh well, no, really, okay, the reading thing is important, so let me move that forward and put coding last because that's a priority. And then it becomes like, well, how do I do this at scale? Like, I can't replicate myself because at one point, like, I had like 17 people teaching this in the summer, like, you know, like we're crushing it, right? But it was just too heavy and clunky, and I was like, I wanted to scale it, like, I want a scalable business, right? And so it's like, how do I do this in a scalable way that doesn't require me hiring a bunch of people and then to train and all the stuff I learned. And then it was like, okay, technology. And then in a matter of like, how do I use technology in a way to scale this? And for me, it was like recreating the process that I was doing, but I had to recreate the process so online. So I had to take the offline process, put it online, and then I had to do it in a way that didn't require the teacher to have to drive it. So I had to be very careful. I had to like guide kids through this experience where it's self-paced, right? And so it required a certain amount of attention. So I prototyped that out and showed that to people and all that kind of stuff. And so the point is that throughout the process of trying to understand the unique value proposition, is that I had to be open. I had to like really listen to them. I had to watch, and then I had to be okay with changing things and not so stubborn on like it gotta be this way and I'm gonna force it to be this way, right? Because it's like there's like we put too much into it. Like no, like even if you put $1 million into it and you lose it all as zero, like then and it doesn't work, then that's a waste. So like I mean I'd rather spend $1 million figuring out it's not working, pivot it, and then have the hope of instead of going to zero, I have the hope of like going back, you know, like recouping my money, right? So you just had it like so it's just constant experimentation, constant.
Here's the last thing I'm thinking about on your story because it comes in a lot. I think in social enterprises, we were just talking about it, where you have like a difference between customers and users and advocates, right? So like in this situation, you ended up with where your final customer really was the parent who paid for increased access to a program that the teacher introduced to the kid in the classroom.
Yeah, the teacher was an advocate.
So the teacher gets the program for free, introduces it to the kids in the classroom. The kids get limited access. They really like it. The parents buy increased access to improve the kids' reading and give them something they like to do. In that case, then, you have like 3 UVPs essentially.
It's more into now where, and maybe it's just because it's just easier for me now or whatever, but where I'm more interested in working with districts and helping them to implement coding programs in a way that makes sense, like around reading, right? And so, like to me, that's a bigger dollar amount. I've been in the game long enough where I've had these relationships that are now opening those doors up to me. Will I get back there to that product? Like, yeah, but ed tech is historically just hard. Like we had a group that came through here last cohort, Squiggle Park, and I'm familiar with what she's doing. She's funded, but ed tech is just hard. It's just a hard space to be in.
But can you say a little bit about? Do you think because this is social enterprises very commonly have like advocates, users, and customers.
Right.
Do you think they all have a separate unique value proposition, or are you trying to get one that kind of lands between all 3 of them, or how do you think about UVP with those different groups?
So I think that ultimately, if I got to where I was able to drive parents, so one, I think that in my case, the advocate, that the unique value proposition is because I would advertise on Facebook to teachers very specifically. Give me all 3rd grade teachers, 4th grade teachers, 5th grade teachers. This characteristic, women, like I didn't want to talk to men. I wanted to talk to a younger skew because they were more accepting of or receptive to using technology and coding and trying new things. And so it was a very specific thing, and I spoke to them very specifically, right? I wasn't, and the goal was to get them to drive them then to this one page that was specifically for them.
For the teachers.
For the teachers, right? Where then they would sign up and do their thing, right? And then, but the front page of the website was in a perfect world if I was able to then convince the parents to be able to buy this, I want that front page to be geared towards them, right?
Towards parents.
Towards those parents, right? And so the advocates were I look at it as a distribution channel, which I sent off to like some landing page that existed somewhere on my website. But then the goal was that the customer was the parent, and that front page needs to be them. But it could have, there's some common language there.
The common language, but unique to their separate pain point.
Yeah, it's like you can use it like I explore, I experiment with language like learning guardians, right? K5. Instead of saying K5 educators or teachers, because a parent may not see themselves in there, I would say anybody who considers themselves a learning guardian in the K5 experience, this is for you, right? So I was constantly playing with language and words and testing and seeing how that resonates and trying to find if I can find some similarities, because it started to get really confusing on how I
it's complex.
Yeah, it's very complex.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Any questions from the?
Well, yeah, just as a recap, like the UVP is like you have to do your customer discovery, and you have to uncover the problems that they're having, like and you have to obviously come up with unique solutions. So your question is that were there other people in the space? Like I'm competing with the status quo. I'm competing with other coding programs that are free. I'm competing with other reading programs that are free, right? They're all doing it this way. They're doing this. So I have to do something that's so unique and different that they say, wait, that's how do you do that, right? Which is the unique part, right? Which is the storytelling, art, and coding. They're like, wait, I've never heard anybody talk about brain reading and coding together. It's so unique that it warrants me to stop this conversation, or stop in this conversation and to dive deeper into that. And if you do your UVP right, if you construct it right and identify who the customer is and speak very clearly and it resonates with them in terms of the problem, and then say something that stops them in their track because it's so unique and different, it's what opens the door up for you, right? And allows everything to happen. So that's kind of the formula that once you figure that out, then you can put it into that one sentence that I like to often use as an elevator pitch, which is, like if someone asks me specifically what Learn Jelly does, then I would say, Learn Jelly is an education company that helps K5 educators or learning guardians improve their students' reading skills through storytelling, art, and coding. It hits everything and it stops them.
Yeah.
Right?
They want to know more.
Yeah, they want to know more. And that's the elevator pitch, right? It's like you're trying to always win the next 30 seconds or whatever, but in order to do that, you gotta it has to hit them, it has to resonate. So that's why UVP is important. Once you figure out the unique value proposition and put it together in one sentence, then you use it. And the other thing is it helps you to create your product and grow your product in a way, because you're always saying to yourself, am I creating this product? Am I uplifting this unique value proposition, right? If we're an education company and now we're doing something else, this is not what our unique value proposition is. So it becomes like the guide that you use to keep yourself on course. So you say, we're we're not going to develop products for middle school and high school because we're for K5 learning guardians. Done. End of conversations. We need to we're going to help kids improve their golf skills. No, we're not. We're going to help them improve their reading because that's what we do, right? And then it becomes when we're incorporating this product, are we incorporating storytelling, art, and coding in the mix, right? And if we're not, then we're losing it. And so that unique value proposition becomes the guiding principle that you keep yourself on target as you develop and grow your products and services.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because it's been informed by all of the categories that come before that.
Yeah.
You've done your homework on your customer segment. You know that customer segment is the right one that aligns with your mission and impact, right? Mm-hmm. That allows you to have the mission impact you want. this is the right customer segment for you. So then this is that customer segment's problem. You've identified that problem, and now here's your unique solution. So then if you get down into the sales and the revenue categories and you start going, we need to change what product we're delivering or how we're delivering it, this should be your buffer, because you don't want to go back and redo all this work that you already did to identify your customer, right? And so it's like the number in that canvas is important because they all build on each other, and then you have this statement that comprises everything.
And I want to say it just like everybody that like you can start to, like, we're all looking for like some consistency. And like in the early stages of this, of any startup, like you can start to feel very scared and like you're all over the place. I mean, you could be all over the place, right? But if your goal is to if you're trying to figure out what's the unique value proposition, and then you will find that you will have to make plenty of pivots, and that makes you feel like you're all over the place, right? But really, you're super focused, right? You're just trying to navigate your way to the right place, right? And so I wanted to say, because I remember feeling that way, like, dang man, like I can't get this right every week. Like what I'm doing or how am I saying is changing up, and that could start wearing me, because I'm like, why can't I just be? But really, the reality was I was just refining it. So it's just the messaging was just super clear and focused, right? So I wasn't necessarily all over the place.
And then once you have it, it's very powerful. So it's worth taking the time to kind of get it. Kind of get it stated out clearly.
Yeah, it is.
Cool. Good out there.
Any questions? Anybody got any questions?
They're good.
Man.
You're clear.
I'm all clear?
Yeah, you're clear.
All right, well.
Next, we're going to start bringing in, so we did these first two with us because we wanted you guys to know more about our stories since we're going to be working with you. And now we're going to start rolling in some alumni from the program and some Rally Fellows.
And even people from outside the organization.
Probably.
Like that one guy, the Amy Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
South Africa, he signed up. Yeah.
So we'll bring in different people, but we'll commit them all to a box in the social lean canvas, and we'll tell you ahead which one they're going to work on.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. See you on Thursday?
And see.
Oh, yes.